Right, welcome back everyone. It was a short break, but we are now resuming this issue-specific hearing, and we're resuming at agenda item 3D in relation to day lane, Broadway lane and heavy goods vehicles. Question for the applicant to start with, and that is, during the operation of the proposed development, how many and what sort of large or oversized vehicles will need to access the converter station site? Mr. Williams?
Sorry, sir. So during normal operation of the converter station, it's not anticipated that any oversized vehicles would be required to access the converter station site. These would only be required in the event of a fault or to replace equipment such as transformers. Where these are required, it's also worth noting that these would need to go through the relevant risk assessment and method statements, and the haulier would be responsible for agreeing the arrangements with the local highway authorities, as stated previously.
So, thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any concerns in that regard, the notification or delivery during operation? Okay, nothing heard. In which case, move on to the next point. At Day Lane and Broadway Lane, there were two options shown in Appendix 5 to Appendix F of the transport assessment. There were option 1, whereby limited on carriageway works were proposed to be undertaken, and then option 2, which of course has got the HGV overrun area shown upon it. And the question in relation to that is, why can't normal construction vehicles utilise the existing highway network without modification, in light of option 1, which seems to suggest that even AILs may be able to use the existing highway with minor modification. If option 1 is not feasible, why not? Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you, sir. So in general terms, option 1 was not pursued for the reason that it created an unsafe layout from a highway safety perspective. It would have been a confusing layout for traffic approaching from Day Lane, which would likely lead to vehicles either misjudging the existing bend or overshooting into the access itself. It would have provided very limited forward visibility to oncoming traffic due to the existing bend, and the presence of Scottish and Southern electricity network infrastructure on the corner of Day Lane, Broadway Lane would have resulted in the risk of closure of an access in this location at any times when maintenance is required, which is not acceptable due to the need to maintain access at all times to the converter station.
Okay, thank you very much. Could the relevant authorities just confirm that they are in agreement with that, and that in the light of the evidence provided, that the option that has been chosen, it represents a safer highway solution than the option 1 that was discounted? Could I ask that question first of all to Hampshire County Council, please, Mr. Turney?
Sir, I'll ask Holly Drury to answer this, please.
Of course.
We're in agreement with the assessment that Chris's team has undertaken. Amendments to the existing highway just wouldn't work in a practicality sense for the usual traffic when traffic management wasn't in place. So generally we don't have any issues with the layout that they're proposing at present, and I think we're pretty much there with their construction access arrangements.
Excellent, thank you very much for confirming that. Does anyone else? Well, Mr. Turney, you're back.
So can I just raise a point of procedure, just to note that my understanding is there's an issue with the live stream at the moment. I don't know if that affects how you want to proceed, but those who are following this from my team on the live stream said they're disconnected at the moment.
Okay, bear with me one moment. I'll just confirm that with my team what is happening with that. Right, yes, as I understand it, there is an issue with the live stream that is not restarting after the break. I just asked my case manager, Mr. Jones, if he could just explain what the situation is and what we should do at the present time. Mr. Jones, please.
Hello there, Heaven Jones, case manager. I've spoken to Duncan at Production 78, who's aware that the live stream didn't restart after the break. It's something they are actively looking into to resolve ASAP. However, they've confirmed that the recording is not affected. So for those that may have missed the first 10 minutes or so, it will still appear on the recording when that's published in due course.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Thank you for that. What I propose to do is to keep going with our hearing session, asking and answering questions as we go on, and anyone who has not been able to watch the live stream to catch up on the recording later. That is my proposal. Are there any objections to that course of action? Okay, nothing heard, in which case I will continue on if that is okay, in which point I'll now return back to the applicant. Mr. Williams, you've heard comments there from Hampshire. Is there anything you wish to add on that, please?
No, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next question then, and as I do, I'll be just putting hopefully a diagram on screen. What this diagram is, it's from the supplementary transport assessment provided by the applicant at deadline 1, and it shows the position on day lane, boundary lane regarding Broadway lane, sorry, regarding banksman positions. And the related question is this, in the sense that with respect to management of construction traffic on Day Lane, can the applicant set out the predicted effectiveness of using banksmen to coordinate HGV movements? Apart from the purpose-built access on the corner with Broadway Lane, how does the applicant intend to prevent HGVs meeting other non-construction traffic and potentially waiting within the public highway? Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to start by noting that following discussions with Hampshire County Council, the applicant is intending to implement an amended strategy for the management of construction traffic on Day Lane. This still uses banksmen to coordinate HGV movements along Day Lane itself, as included for within the supplementary transport assessment and framework CTMP, but it takes a more strategic approach to the management of arrivals and departures to help remove the possibility of vehicles meeting on Day Lane itself. So the proposed amended methodology aims to hold HGVs on site until there are 3 ready to leave the site, which reduces the instance of vehicles travelling eastbound along Day Lane from once every 10 minutes to once every half an hour. And this would be controlled by the banksman that we have set out. In terms of HGVs arriving, it's proposed that that there is a requirement to pre-book an arrival time at the converter station and also check-in prior to the arrival, which would prevent conflicts occurring with departing HGVs. So the exhibit which we provided includes details of laybys mainly located on the strategic road network that are within a 20-minute drive of the site, and it would be the intention that these could be used by HGVs travelling to the site, to park and check in prior to their arrival. It would be a case that these HGVs would only be permitted to continue their onward travel to the converter station if it was not the case that HGVs had also been permitted to depart or were about to depart, and also that another HGV had not been given permission to access the site itself. As I said, it's the intention to still continue to use stop-go boards and banksmen on day lane, but the revised strategy we feel is appropriate to provide adequate mitigation and prevent vehicle conflicts from occurring on day lane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in terms of non-construction related traffic, let's just assume a situation where a HGV going to the converter station site has got its pre-booked time and it starts making its way to there, and someone else, say in a tractor or a diverted HGV from elsewhere unrelated to construction, will attempt to use day lane. What sort of authority would the banksman be able to have over those other vehicles to ensure that they don't get in the way of the HGV approaching?
The intention would be that the banksman could, in similar circumstances to where you have, for example, escort vehicles that sometimes used with HGVs, that they would be able to direct general traffic to stop at the locations which we have identified, and those locations provide adequate passing abilities for two vehicles on day lane.
Okay, thank you for that. And just in relation to the plan that's on screen now, the lay-by locations, whilst I'll be asking Hampshire County Council this in a moment, I'll ask yourself, are Highways England, to the best of your knowledge, happy with the use of lay-bys on the strategic road network for the temporary holding parking of HGVs?
This is something we've not discussed with them to date, but I would be surprised if there was any reason why it would generate a concern, noting that the lay-bys identified are parking areas used by such vehicles on a daily basis already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate Mr. Hayward's hand is up, but first of all, if I could just ask that question to Mr. Turney with regard to the use of the lay-bys on the A3M for the temporary holding of vehicles, please.
Sir Richard Turney for Hampshire County Council. We're relatively recently in receipt of the latest information from the applicant on management of day lane. So we are going to have to come back in writing. In answer to your specific question, I don't know if Holly Drury can assist right now in saying whether or not that's acceptable. She's switched on, so she might be able to.
No, it was one of the issues that I was going to raise, that it is something that we need to circulate and discuss with Highways England about whether they're content for their lay-bys to be used for such use. It's also whether those lay-bys have got the capacity to do so, and how we ensure that there is the free capacity to hold the lorries on the way to the day lane. If I may also, so I've got some additional high-level concerns from my original review, my look, that I still think may be outstanding from their additional information, although I appreciate I haven't looked at it in great detail. But it's how the traffic is, how the HGVs and held traffic is managed at the Loveding Lane Daylay junction. Obviously, holding traffic at a junction raises some safety concerns for me with regards to increased risk of shunts, etc. It's how the traffic is managed from the houses that are on Day Lane itself. It was something that was missed under the original submission. And my only other sort of high-level priority concern is that there is only one location along Day Lane that we are agreed lorries can pass in the vicinity of the access to the solar farm. Other than that, the remainder of the route doesn't facilitate a lorry and a car being able to pass each other safely.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jury. Mr. Tony, was there anything else?
Just one further point there. I think you asked a question about whether a banksman can direct traffic, and of course they can't direct traffic. That they can ask nicely, as it was put to me, but can do nothing more than that. So there is a concern about this management, but we are in receipt of further information, I think, which was sent on Friday. So we're going to have to go through that, hopefully discuss with the applicant further and come back at a later deadline.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask Mr. Hayward just to be patient a little while longer, if you don't mind, Mr. Hayward. I'm just going to get Mr. Jarvis's or Mr. Williams' response to that. Mr. Jarvis.
Just one point there in relation to banksmen holding traffic. The development consent order does provide for temporary traffic regulation orders to be made, which could be made and which could be implemented by such banksmen. So it is something that's already covered. I don't know if Mr. Williams has anything to add there. Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Just in relation to the other points, it's the intention that traffic will be managed at the Lovedene Lane, Day Lane junction through the use of stop-go boards, but they would be positioned on Lovedene Lane itself rather than Day Lane to remove the potential for vehicles to turn the corner and be presented with a vehicle which had been stopped on carriageway there. In terms of the width of Day Lane itself, conscious that we'll probably come on to this in a moment. We've completed some on-site investigations, and it is something which we are currently still looking at, but we have noted that the actual highway width is actually wider in a lot of locations than shown on the OS mapping along Day Lane. So we note that, yes, the carriageway is still narrow in places, but it does provide more opportunities for two vehicles to pass than the OS mapping does suggest.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There's a further question on the agenda which we'll come to shortly, but Mr. Hayward, apologies for keeping you waiting. What would you like to say, sir?
So my interest was sparked by the notion that banksmen would be allowed to direct traffic. Banksmen aren't allowed to direct traffic on the public highway. To do that, you would need a traffic marshal, a specifically accredited CSAS accredited traffic marshal rather than a banksman. Traffic regulation orders can be put into effect with banksmen operating stop-go boards and that sort of equipment, but it may be a moot point. They specifically can't direct traffic on the highway without being formally accredited traffic marshals, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayward. That's useful to know. How would the applicant wish to respond to this? Mr. Williams?
Thank you. That point is noted. If it's the use of traffic marshals that needs to be referred to directly within our strategy, then I don't see any reason why we can't do that.
Okay, I mean, it certainly sounds like there's work in progress on that between the parties, and we're more than grateful for those taking place offline, as the case would be. But just moving on to a related, closely related question, in that, does the applicant consider additional passing bays or waiting areas to be required on Day Lane and Lovedene Lane? If not, why not? Mr. Williams.
Thank you. So as I've just mentioned, this is something that is currently work in progress. We are looking at whether there is potential to provide passing bays along Day Lane, although noting, as I have just done, that the width is greater than the OS mapping has shown in a lot of places along Day Lane. With this in mind and the proposed amendments to the strategy, we do not currently feel that they would be required to manage HGV access along this route. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any points to raise on this particular issue? Ms. Drury, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, sorry. It's just to seek some assurance from us, really, that I think it's something that's worth exploring, because I can't guarantee that the strategy that they put forward as an alternative is going to be acceptable. So the provision of passing bays and understanding whether that is a possibility would be something that the Highway Authority would welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Any last thoughts on that, Mr. Williams?
Thank you, sir. We'll submit our final thoughts on that for deadline 6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, just before we move on to agenda item 3E, we are aware of a continuing issue with regards to the live stream. It's not functioning correctly. Whilst you can be reassured that the recording of the event is intact, it is unaffected, and parties will be able to catch up on any matters missed when the recording is published. I suggest that what we might try and do is get that live stream back for the benefit of the general public watching this and any interested parties. And so what I'd like to propose is, Mr. Thompson, I believe you're from Production 78. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for the confirming that. So we should be live. I was about to suggest an early lunch, but now that I know that that is on, unless there's any objections, we'll just move on to the next agenda item rather swiftly. Apologies, I'll keep you waiting for your lunch a bit later. Mr. Thompson, your hand is still raised. If you could lower that for me, please. So on to agenda item 3E then. Question for the applicant. With reference to the framework traffic management strategy, could the applicant explain or provide insight as to whether any greater certainty can be applied to the weeks per circuit construction programme? Why are there differences, and what factors would influence prolonging the construction? Mr. Williams.
Thank you. So I'd just like to point out that all estimated construction durations included within the FTMS are based on assumed installation rates of the cable ducts for the onshore cable corridor, taking account varying levels of services and other constraints which may impact upon the rate of installation. These have been derived using professional judgment and experience of similar projects, with a review of these completed in the ES addendum submitted at deadline 1, which provided a more detailed breakdown of installation rates by location in comparison with the original 2019 environmental statement. This included a range of installation rates between 12 and 30 metres a day in highways and 50 metres per day in open country and agricultural land, with the overall installation rate across the entire onshore cable corridor not changing from the original submission. In terms of the variations that have been noted in the FTMS, these were related to either optionality in regards to final route alignment or working hours. So in section 4.1 along the B2150 Hambledon Road, there is an option to route one circuit through Hambledon Parade and Southdown View on the northern side of Hambledon Parade, which would take construction off the main Hambledon Road carriageway and thereby reduce the impacted time to between 11 and 22 weeks per circuit. On Havant Road within section 5.4, there is an optionality regarding working hours, with an option to either for construction to take place between 7 and 10 over the course of a weekend, or sunrise to sunset over a weekend. In section 8.1, the optionality in working hours is relating to either 24-hour, 7-day-a-week working or 10-hour, 7-day-a-week working. And in section 8.2, which is Eastern Road adjacent to Milton Common, there is optionality there, both in terms of the route alignment, insofar that circuits could be installed within Milton Common itself, and the working hours, whereby there is a range of different working hours permitted for different sections of the route, should that take place on carriageway itself. These could take place either under 24-hour working or 10-hour working as it heads south from Milton Common. In all cases, it will be for the contractor to determine the most appropriate approach to construction of the onshore cable route, informed through detailed assessment and detailed design. However, in all cases, the ES assessment undertaken has accounted for a worst case duration of impacts. And in all cases, regardless of route choice, the construction of the onshore cable route will need to take place in accordance with the programme and calendar restrictions contained within the FTMS. With regards to apologies, I think that was it on my part. Sorry. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for that. I personally have no further questions for you on this. Is there anything from any other party on that point? Okay, nothing heard. The last question within agenda item 3E then is, what engineering challenges does the applicant envisage during onshore construction that would warrant the contractor deviating from the applicant's own identified preferred working hours and routes? Is this purely down to the skill or the ability of the contractor? I imagine the first point is for Mr. Williams, maybe the latter point for Mr. Jarvis, but in the first instance, Mr. Williams, please.
I'd like to pass this to my colleague, Mr. Bolch, please.
Of course.
Thank you, Chris. Oliver Bolch, WSP, acting on behalf of the applicant. So in relation to the question, the most common challenges faced during a project of this nature would be previously unidentified or uncharted services. So we've got services in locations different to what's detailed on existing route records. We have other unknown obstacles within the presence of the highway itself, and also the presence of a high water table, which could lead to unforeseen ground conditions. So deviations will not be based upon character skill level, but upon the challenges faced. All appointed contractors will be appropriately skilled and experienced, and any deviations will be required to comply with the mitigations and controls provided in accordance with the assessment undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you very much on that. I have no further questions. Does anyone else wish to raise a point on this? Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to raise that in Portsmouth itself, that we know that Milton Common as the preferred route is reclaimed ground and has lots of contamination issues. And so that's our main concern, that there's a high possibility that the route may well be diverted onto Eastern Road itself. And that's so where our main concern about the cable route being deviated lies.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Flynn. Yes, there is retained optionality at the moment regarding that. Mr. Bolch, would you like to just comment on that a bit further?
In relation to that question, would you be able to repeat that question? Sorry.
Yes, it was just in relation to the optionality at Milton Common, either taking it across through the Common compared to going through Eastern Road. Maybe your colleague Mr. Jarvis is about to answer this for you.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, sir. So just to note that we discussed the challenges at Milton Common last week in some detail with regards to the ground conditions, why optionality has been retained, that it's the preference of the applicant to go across Milton Common, but that it is necessary to retain the flexibility to route along Eastern Road for in the event one or both of the cable circuits cannot be located across Milton Common. and just to acknowledge that further information with regards to feasibility and in particular the potential need for load spreading because of the made ground element of Milton Common will be submitted at deadline 6 further to the post-hearing notes requested last week. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, I remember those. Does anyone else wish to raise any comments on agenda item 3E? Okay, nothing heard. I will move on then to agenda item 3F. Only one question under this section. First of all, for the applicant, in the applicant's comments on D1 submissions, it is noted that there are ongoing discussions with the bus companies and that appropriate mitigation can be secured. Can the applicant provide the minutes of the meetings? I'm aware that you have already done so with your transcript, with first group and stagecoach to the examination, and confirm the status of discussions with both bus companies. Is there any additional mitigation measures arising from the meetings with the bus companies to limit the impact on their services? Mr. Williams.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by providing a brief summary of the assessments undertaken. Thank you. So an assessment of the impact of local bus services was completed in the supplementary transport assessment using outputs from the SRTM. This assessment was based on a cross-section of routes, which considered both those that routed along the onshore cable corridor and those which may be impacted by traffic reassignment across the wider highway network. The assessment included an assessment of 7 routes, which is shown graphically on plate 27 of the supplementary transport assessment, and included bus services that route across both the Portsmouth and Hampshire networks. Generally, the assessment showed that increases in bus journey times were 10% or less in the AM inter-peak and PM peak periods. It's noted by the applicant that there are, in some occasions, increases above 10% in terms of journey time, but where these have occurred, they were on services that are either impacted by multiple sets of traffic management, as assessed within the SRTM, or through traffic reassignment away from such works. The applicant therefore notes that the FTMS prevents such a scenario from occurring through the programme restrictions along adjoining parts of the highway corridor, which would therefore limit the level of delay to less than modelled and reported in the supplementary transport assessment. As a result of this, the conclusion from the applicant is that there is a generally minor impact on bus routes across the study area, and where these are more pronounced, the impact will be for a short period, or as I said, mitigated through the FTMS. In addition to this assessment, the applicant has had meetings with both First Group and Stagecoach in October 2020 to discuss the proposals. During these meetings, we presented the bus operators with details of the construction programme and the traffic management and FTMS requirements. During these meetings, neither bus operators expressed significant concerns regarding the proposals or impacts to bus services. It was also noted in these meetings that in the limited circumstances where road closures are required to construct the onshore cable route, the diversions to bus routes associated with these could be implemented very simply. It was agreed with bus operators that further meetings would be held if required, following their full review of the FTMS and road closure requirements, which was shared after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'll come first of all to Mr. Turney on behalf of Hampshire County Council. Obviously, some of these bus routes run up the A3 corridor. I think they're routes 7 and 8 and the star routes. You've heard what's been said. I don't know if you've had time to read and digest the minutes of those meetings held with First Group and Stagecoach, but do you have any views on the impacts on the bus services and the mitigations necessary for them, please?
So Richard Turney for Hampshire County Council. At the outset, I'll just note that Holly Drury may come in on points of detail here, but just to set out the County Council's position on this, there's also been County Council engagement with the bus services. There is concern about the overall severity of the impact on the network, and that includes, of course, impacts on bus services. One of the ways in which it may be necessary in due course to react to that will be through ensuring that the service level of bus services is maintained, potentially through additional resources for supporting those bus services. Essentially, the County Council is not content to rely on the assertion by the applicant that the impacts will be minor in nature. There is a need to mitigate any adverse impacts through the provision potentially of additional funding to ensure that those services are maintained. The other point to note is that the A3 corridor is the subject of a concerted effort by the County Council and by Portsmouth City Council to improve bus infrastructure, and it's the subject of a TCF bid. And in light of all that investment and the importance that's put on the corridor, the delays that are created by these works can have a potentially more significant impact on the overall strategy of trying to ensure bus service provision. So we don't think that the point is answered by the bus operators receiving the applicant's view that the impacts on them will be minimal. Of course, if the bus operator is told by the applicant that they don't need to worry about the impacts on them, then they're not going to worry about the impacts on them. The County Council, as Highways Authority, is concerned about the impacts on this part of the corridor and does still seek further mitigation on that. In terms of the detail, I don't know if Mr. Drury wants to raise any further point. I can't assist on the bus routes that would be affected. I'm not familiar with those, but I'll hand over to her if she has anything to add.
Of course. Ms. Drury?
I don't know that I've got any more detail than what's already been set out within the written documentation that you're in receipt of. It would just be a variation on interpretation of that detail, which I think we set out within our deadline 5 response. It's also worth noting that some of the impacts that are more significant are on routes that aren't just the Star 7 and 8. There's quite a wide selection of routes that are affected by the works that might not primarily be on that corridor. That's it really. It's just reiterating my point about journey time reliability and the impacts that might have on whether people choose to use the buses over the prolonged period of the works or not. And unlike car journeys, people who use buses can't just choose to use a different bus route. They're going to have to change to a different mode, and that could have quite a detrimental effect over the long-term strategy for the area.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that. Before I go to Portsmouth, I'll just refer this back to the applicant. You've obviously heard the views there from Hampshire. I wonder if there's any response that you'd like to give at this stage, and without prejudice to anyone's positions, in respect to the comments about additional funds or resources for the bus companies, whether you consider there's any merit in exploring them. Perhaps the first point to Mr. Jarvis, please.
Before I go into that, I would just outline that the applicant has assessed what the impact would be and he has explained the outcomes of the assessment to the bus companies. It's not the case that the applicant has had discussions downplaying what that assessment outlines. It has clearly explained the assessment undertaken, explained what the impacts are assessed to be, and therefore identified that the impacts are minor. So it is somewhat more than an assertion, as was put forward there. And we would not accept the suggestion that we have just told the bus operators that they do not need to worry about any of these issues. With regards to the provision of mitigation and any funding, it's only required where it's necessary to mitigate an impact. And as I've just explained, we've assessed the impacts and we've identified that they're minor. And based on the journey time increases that we've identified over the temporary transient periods that the works would be undertaken, it's not considered that a service level agreement is necessary. We will continue to discuss this with Hampshire County Council, but unless we get some clear evidence as to why mitigation is needed, it's not proposed that mitigation is to be put forward. And then just the last point I'll make before I pass to Chris Williams to see if he has any further comments. The comments made with regards to the A3 corridor and the improvements that are to be made for bus infrastructure are noted. It's not expected that the temporary impacts of the works over their period would have any lasting permanent impact on the reasons for which that infrastructure is provided. So it's not entirely clear what the point is that's being made there by Hampshire County Council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, is there anything you wish to add?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to make the point again that the restrictions within the framework traffic management strategy limit the periods during which shuttle working or temporary traffic signals could be implemented to facilitate construction of the onshore cable route along the A3 London Road, and that it is these instances that create the most significant delay to bus services. They are very limited in time period across the entirety of the construction programme, and in cases for the A3 London Road, they are limited to the school holiday periods and June and July, when general traffic flows are generally lower than at other times of years, thereby mitigating the delay at these locations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before I hand back to Mr. Turney, because I see his hand is raised, I'd just like to say we've obviously got the minutes of the meetings with First Group. I understand from my records that First Group are a interested party. They submitted a relevant representation to this examination, and I'd just like to extend the invite to them, rather than have the applicant and Hampshire County Council speaking on your behalf. If there's any views that you wish to put forward to the examination and for us to consider, then by all means please do so. That's not downplaying the roles of either the parties have mentioned. That's just, if you have anything further to add as your own organisation, would be much appreciated to have those. Mr. Turney, you wish to come back on a point?
So Richard Turney for Hampshire County Council. I note what Mr. Jarvis says, but it's helpful that he starts by saying they'll continue to discuss these matters with us. I think there are points of interpretation here about the extent of the impacts on the bus services, and certainly the County Council is not content to say that these are impacts which can be tolerated without further mitigation, and that's really the position. We'll take it away with them. Obviously, the longer term aspirations for the corridor are particularly important when one is considering whether these works will have an impact on bus services and the extent to which those will be mitigated. So it's not the case that those points can be dismissed. And of course, there remain quite considerable uncertainties about the impact of this scheme. We've already dealt today with two instances where the likely joint bay location is identified as being in a bus lane, and those are the sort of impacts which, whilst uncertain at the moment, may cause material impacts on bus services. So there's more work to be done as we see it, but I think for the purposes of today, it would probably be better if we take this away. Mr. Jarvis has agreed that they'll continue to discuss with us, and of course we can listen to what the bus companies say as well.
Of course. It certainly sounds like something where maybe the parties have reached their respective positions on it, but we do welcome ongoing discussions to resolve any issues. Mr. Jarvis, Mr. Williams, anything further on this point?
No, sir. We will continue discussions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just on that question in Agenda 3F, I'm conscious I've heard from Hampshire County Council. Is there anything that Portsmouth City Council would like to raise at this time in relation to that question? Mr. Hayward.
Hello, sir. Within Portsmouth, the route is largely not located in areas where buses would have priority. So the effect of the works is on general traffic is largely the same effect experienced by buses, in that they'll be caught up in the general traffic delay rather than having their advantages undermined.
Understood.
So to that degree, we're not expecting to have more people travelling by bus or need more capacity on the route. The effect will be on the bus headway and the journey time and the time between buses, rather than the capacity or the ability to get there any quicker. So I don't think we're of the view, I don't mean think, so we're not of the view that we would need to put additional buses into that network to reduce that headway, because we're simply dealing with, we're not dealing with more capacity, it's just a journey time issue. It's not a good outcome, but I think it's where we are.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hayward. Mr. Jarvis, Mr. Williams, who wishes to respond on this?
I don't have anything to add there, but I will just check, Mr. Williams, whether you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much all for that. We are now at the end, or nearly at the end, I should say, of agenda item 3. At the start of this meeting, Mr. Turney, you raised several potential points regarding highways and highways issues. I trust that we have covered them all throughout the course of our morning's discussion, but are there any further points on highways matters that you intended to raise that we've not yet covered?
I think there are a couple of points. If I just hand over to Holly Drury, please.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I was frantically trying to message him. There's two, I think, that haven't really come up in the round. One's to sort of just flag about the work travel plan for the construction site and the cable workers. We've requested within our deadline 5 a sort of review of that travel plan and the way that it's built, and to try and engage in a more bespoke way of dealing with the travel plan situation moving forward, with the lack of certainty on where the contractors will be coming from. That makes it very difficult to secure a decent travel plan with appropriate measures. And I think it's quite key in securing something that is meaningful in order to mitigate the impacts to the residents of Lovedene. There's quite a significant number of movements going through Lovedene Lane in particular, which does concern me. So if we can put measures in to minimise those, they'd be welcomed. The other thing that is a major concern for Hampshire County Council is works coordination around Ladybridge Roundabout. We've got a TCF project there, which I think Hampshire are moving forward to try and install prior to AQUIND's programme, but there are no guarantees to that. And there's also the implementation of the Waterlooville MDA Southern Access. The assumptions for their modelling has all been done based on the fact that that scheme will be in place, but I don't have high hopes that that will be the case. And I think there's likely to be some real need for works coordination and detail matters to be dealt with there. There's quite a few engineering difficulties around that location with the box culvert that goes across the carriageway. So it's just how those are going to be managed by the applicant and how we secure that that is the case within the DCO, especially given the weight of housing need within the area.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Drury. Mr. Turning, anything else to add?
No, so just to note procedurally though, that as I understand matters, you'll be moving on to deal with air quality issues, and therefore I won't keep my whole traffic team online. So if there are further questions for us, could you raise those now?
Yeah, of course. No, I have no further questions for you. I'm just going to put those most recent points made across to the applicant. Mr. Jarvis, Mr. Williams, you've obviously heard those 2 points raised there. I am content if you wish to answer them now, or content as well if you wish to respond in writing at deadline 6. But do you have any comments, either of you, at this time on what's just been said?
I think we'll respond at deadline 6 if that's okay, sir. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of agenda item 3. For those of you watching the live stream, you may have realised an apparent skip of some of the content. There was about 20 minutes there where the live stream was not working properly, but please be assured that the recording has been made and you'll be able to catch up with that later on. Hopefully this won't have inconvenienced you too much. We apologise for that brief break in our transmission. What I propose now, it is 1 o'clock. I propose that we resume and continue with agenda item 4 on the agenda after lunch, which will be up until 2 o'clock. If I could see you all at 2 o'clock, please, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.